A great way to know whether something you've created is actually good or not is figuring out, well, what is the goal of that thing that I made? So when writing, say, a post-chorus, it's important to know, well, what are the goals of a post-chorus in order to really answer the question, is my post-chorus a good one or is it an effective one? So let's talk about goals for a post-chorus. One of the main goals we should have for our post-chorus is simply to keep the party going. So an after party tends to be one of the most common ways to describe what a post-chorus really should be, with the chorus being that main party. But then you're like, you know what? I'm not quite ready to be done. I'm having a good time with my friends, and I know the party is shutting down right now, but you know what? Let's go back to one of our houses and continue hanging out for a little bit because I'm not quite sick of you yet. So what do? We have some form of after party. So that's sort of what the post-chorus should be. It's not really its own section that is completely separate from the chorus. That's why it's called a post-chorus. Now, in the spirit of this keep the party going concept, we actually want to make sure that in our post-chorus, the energy of the chorus actually continues or sometimes is even heightened. So we don't want to have that energy sort of diminish in our post-chorus. Otherwise, it's not really keeping the party going. We want to make sure that whatever that energy level was in the chorus is maintained throughout our post-chorus. So another analogy that might be helpful with this keep the party going concept is really that a post-chorus is to a chorus much like what an encore performance is to the main concert. So if you've ever been to a concert, which I assume you have, but usually the sort of thing that happens is they play a set of like 8, 9, 10 songs, and then they leave the stage and everybody claps and we pretend like we don't know they're coming back out, but we'll just ignore that part for a second. So then they come back out on the stage and do what we call an encore performance, right? They do 2 or 3 more songs after the concert was initially over. So in a way, that's sort of what a post-chorus is to a chorus. It's the same concert overall, so it really is building off of the chorus. But overall, that encore performance is just adding sort of a bonus part to the main concert in the same way that a post-chorus is sort of adding a bonus part to our chorus. Another goal for our post-chorus is to keep it light lyrically. So a lot of post-choruses don't actually have any lyrics at all. In fact, it's very common, say in modern pop music, and especially when EDM really brought post-choruses back to the forefront. Often what would happen is really it just would be a synth part. It wouldn't even have a vocal at all. And if it does have a vocal, it's often something very basic like oohs and ahs and lahs, and then maybe repeating one line that inherently came from the chorus. So for example, Ed Sheeran's Shape of You in the post-chorus is just like a oh ah, oh ah, oh ah, I'm in love with the shape of you. Or Charlie Puth's Attention basically is just what are you doing to me? What are you doing? Ah. And one of the main reasons for this is that really gives that feeling of like a bonus part to the chorus without it really feeling like its own unique section. So a post-chorus is kind of interesting because it sort of is a hybrid between just sort of a tag on at the end of a chorus and its own unique section. It is overall its own unique section, but it's very much a section that can only exist with a chorus. Unlike something like a bridge or a verse, which doesn't inherently need other parts of the song to exist necessarily, a post-chorus very much belongs to the chorus, and you can't have a post-chorus without a chorus. And overall, if we get too heavy with the lyrics in our post-chorus, it starts to really not be a post-chorus anymore and starts to drift towards being what maybe you could call a second chorus or a chorus 2, where it is functionally a second chorus, a totally separate chorus, rather than just a post-chorus, which is that bonus section of a chorus. Another goal for a post-chorus is to have an absolutely killer hook. Now you might say, well, every section of the song should have a really good hook. And that may be true, although I would argue that usually in verses you need a better instrumental hook than you necessarily need in, say, the chorus, because in the chorus, in theory, the vocal melody is such a huge highlight that it sort of functions in the same way as an instrument hook, even to the point that a lot of people will actually call the vocal melody in a chorus a hook, thinking in a more traditional sense of a musical or instrumental hook, where it's basically a part that tends to be pretty short and is repeated and largely functions as a very small, short melody that's repeated over and over again that's meant to sort of hook the listener in and really capture their attention. If there's one section that we really need to make sure has a great one, it would be the post-chorus. So why do I say that maybe the post-chorus is the most important place to have an absolutely killer hook, even above the chorus? Well, to answer that question, I think it's important to talk about what I mean by a hook in this case. So sometimes the word hook is used for a bunch of different things. For example, sometimes people use the term hook to sort of just refer to the chorus in general. And perhaps more common, people will often refer to the vocal melody of the chorus as a hook. Now, I understand where this comes from because in some songs, the vocal melody of the chorus does tend to be very hook-like. But overall, usually when we're thinking of a hook, we're thinking of a very short musical phrase that tends to be repeated over and over again that is meant to really hook the listener in. Now, you can argue that, well, of course, the vocal melody in the chorus should be a hook of kinds, because if the vocal melody in the chorus is not holding your attention, it's not doing its job. And I would agree with that. But usually when we refer to a hook, and maybe the most common use of the word hook is often for something like, say, an electric guitar riff that might play throughout the song, or perhaps just during the verse to help keep the verse more interesting, because the chorus is big and is interesting because the vocal melody is soaring and there's layers of instruments. But sometimes in the verses, that's where you need the piano part or piano hook to be something that's kind of interesting, a little melodic, or maybe you have a guitar hook that's kind of melodic, or maybe you have a synth part that is very melodic. So if you think about what a post-chorus is fundamentally, unlike the chorus, which can have a very fleshed out melody that is not necessarily hook-like in the sense that it's not just a short phrase repeated over and over again, it's a full-fledged melody that has a bunch of different parts. But in the post-chorus, we really want a part that tends to be very hook-like. And in fact, if we go to our previous point, when we talked about how in Charlie Puth's Attention or Shape of You by Ed Sheeran, basically there's just that one vocal line that repeats over and over again, and it tends to be very hook-like in its melodic structure. In fact, if you replaced either one with just maybe a synth part or a guitar hook, you might not even miss a beat. It's very similar in the way that it's written. When it comes to our post-chorus, we want to make sure we have an absolutely killer hook, whether that hook is done with vocals and with very simple lyrics that usually are borrowed from the chorus, or whether that's done with a guitar part or a synth part or a piano part or anything else that you might want. But it does matter that we have an absolutely killer hook, because that is arguably the main attraction of a post-chorus in general. Another goal for our post-chorus is a very practical one, and that's just that it shouldn't overstay its welcome. We've already compared it to an encore performance in a concert. We've already compared it to an after party. Note that an after party is not the same as going to a second party, and an encore performance is not a second full concert. In fact, if we just take the average concert and we think about how many songs they do, it's usually something like 10 songs and then maybe 2 in the encore, or 12 songs and maybe 3 in the encore. So it's something like 25% extra is added at the end. And if we think of an after party, usually an after party, to even qualify as an after party, it can't really be something that is just as long as the party itself. It's usually something like maybe another half of the party's length or so. And keeping those two things in mind, really our post-chorus should be very similar. Overall, I think a good rule of thumb is to try to keep your post-chorus to half the length of your chorus or less. Maybe a little bit more, but overall it certainly shouldn't feel like something that was just as long as the chorus itself. Because going back to our point about how a post-chorus is sort of a hybrid between its own section and just something tagged onto another section, right? It's sort of its own thing, but it also inherently relies on the chorus and is sort of that after party to the chorus. So because of that, we want to make sure that it's not so long that it actually ends up becoming its own complete section, because at that point it really becomes a chorus too, which of course there's nothing wrong with having a chorus too, but usually the way we would treat a chorus too, and the way that we would have the lyrics written and in the way that we might have our melody written tends to be very different than a post-chorus, because it fundamentally has a different job than a post-chorus. Post-chorus keeps the party going, and a second chorus is meant to be a second chorus, a second highlight, something that really stands on its own in a way that a post-chorus wouldn't be expected to. And now that we're talking about practical things, let's throw in a bonus 2 things to think about from a very practical standpoint when thinking through our post-chorus and why even a post-chorus exists. What is the purpose of that section really from a practical standpoint? You may notice that in modern music, there's extra use of a post-chorus compared to, say, 10, 15, and certainly 20 plus years ago. So why is that? Well, I think it's birthed from the concept of you want to change up sections as much as possible to keep a listener's attention. People no longer have the attention span, on average, unfortunately, to say, wait a whole minute until the chorus comes. So often in pop music, you'll notice that a chorus will hit within like 30 seconds because listeners get bored easily. So that is born out of practicality. In the same way, a listener might get bored if you have, say, a 3.5-minute song that only has sections like verses, choruses, and bridges. So if they break it up into smaller sections, then each section only needs to hold the listener's attention for a shorter amount of time. So again, thinking practically, we can have a shorter chorus and then change it up a little bit in the post-chorus, and that's another opportunity to have something change so that the listener's attention is easier to hold. And then the second thing that a post-chorus really allows us to accomplish that seems like it's sort of in conflict with the first one is that it allows you to sort of get that chorus high for a longer period of time while also technically having that new section and really getting people's attention back, because again, it is different enough to maybe make people tune in again and be like, oh yeah, here's a new thing. Oh yeah, here's a new thing. But at the same time, because it keeps that energy level from the chorus or even heightens it even more, and it generally tends to be very similar to the chorus. It usually has the same chord progression or a very similar chord progression, and overall ends up being, as we've talked about, an after party to the chorus. So you're sort of getting to have your cake and eat it too, in the sense that, you know, it's a new section enough to really be able to grab the listener's attention again, but also it is sort of the same as the chorus, and it allows you to really maximize the amount of time that your chorus and your emotional peak of the song gets to be what is playing in the context of your full 3-4 minute song. So you get to change up song sections to keep your listeners' attention, and you get to maximize the amount of time that the highlight of your song is playing within the context of the full song. So if now you're ready to dive in and start writing a song, but maybe you've had some trouble getting stuck recently, or your creativity has been sort of in a lull state, or maybe you're new to songwriting, be sure to check out my free guide on 10 different ways to start writing a song. It gives you 5 ways from a more lyrical and more thematic standpoint, and 5 ways from a more musical standpoint, because I think both are important. And hey, you might be a lyrics first person or a music first person or a hybrid, and in which case there will be 5 ways for you regardless. I think both have their strengths and weaknesses. If we keep doing the same things over and over again, doing the same process and starting the process in the exact same way every time, one of 2 things tends to happen, or both. One is that we tend to go creatively dry, because at some point, I know for myself, I am a piano first type person. I like to come up with a piano riff first and foremost, and sometimes I do guitar as well, but I do prefer the piano. So I tend to start writing a piano riff, and then I build the rest of the song off of that. But sometimes I just sit at the keyboard or the piano and I'm like, I got nothing. And it's because I keep doing that over and over again. So I need to change it up. I need to grab a bass, or I need to grab a guitar, and then maybe I come up with a bass line instead. Or maybe I start from a lyrical standpoint. Maybe I look up some images and get some ideas for cool song titles that really start to inspire me. Or maybe I need to simply just go find a new sound or create a new sound. For example, once I built a song off of just recording a ceiling fan and then slowing it way down and then pitch shifting it way down, and then I built a song off of it, because that inspired me in a way that at the time the piano and the guitar just couldn't, because I had written so many songs with piano and guitar. So I started to get creatively dry. Another thing that can happen is if you keep going to your acoustic guitar and strumming the acoustic guitar and coming up with a chord progression first, your songs might start to sound the same in a way that they probably won't if, for example, you actually get a bass guitar out, or you just use your acoustic guitar, just use the lowest string and come up with a bass line first instead of a chord progression, or you come up with a guitar hook first instead of a chord progression, or you write your vocal melody first instead of a chord progression. So there are so many different ways to start writing a song, and they will all inspire you in slightly different directions. Sure, you're still you as an artist, so you'll still have your signature sound sound usually within that, no matter how you start the song, which I think is a good thing. We all want to have sort of our sound, but we also want to break outside of the box of having all our songs sound exactly the same. Personally, for me, I found it really helpful to start writing a song from different standpoints as a great way to easily accomplish exactly what I just described, where you have a sound as an artist, but also not all your songs sound the same. Because if you don't have a sound as an artist, it feels like you don't really have an artistic identity. It could be that somebody who loves your first song hates your second song, and the people who love your second album will hate your first album. And usually you don't want that, but at the same time, you don't want all your songs to sound the same so that when somebody's done with your album or EP, they're like, oh, I didn't even realize the first song was over, except for the fact that it was really long. So if you are interested in that, be sure to check it out. Link in the description down below. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I'll talk to you in the next one.